Shake, 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 Sinora, shake it all the time.
When you add a shake of Frank's Red Hot, you open a world of better. A world where wings bring out the flavor of game day any day, and where buffalo chicken dip takes any party up a notch. It's the perfect blend of flavor and heat. Frank's Red Hot. I put that on everything.
Hello, loves. Welcome to the Bird Brain Podcast, where the goal is to rise above it all, stay elevated, create that infinity, and up your you. I'm your host, Isaiah, and today we are unpacking the concept of detachment. I think it's something that's talked about now, and I think there's only been a few times someone broke it down and actually understood it or like agreed with the concept, and I'm not perfect, but yeah, it's weird, right? So we're going to talk about that today, what that looks like, how to practice it to some degree, and recognizing the why behind the what. Okay, so get some water, wear a seatbelt if you're driving. If you're at home, find a safe space that feels like home for you specifically, and yeah, just buckle down, tune in, turn on your heart, turn on your ears, and turn off the rest of the world for now. All right, so stay tuned. What's good, peoples? How are you? How's your heart doing? Happy almost June. By the time some of you guys listen to this, it'll probably be June. But if not, we're on the horizon of June. So if you made it this far, I want you to pat yourself on the back, give yourself a little kiss on the shoulder. I saw somebody do that on a TikTok, and when I saw it, I was like, "This is so sweet." This is dope. As much as people talk about self-love, it's like as soon as you do it, or you the action of self-love, literally, people are like, "Oh, that's weird." It's like, nah, you ever stand in the mirror and really take a look at yourself and like stare into your own eyes and say, I love you. I'm proud of you. I see you. And you just stand there. You know how uncomfortable that is for some people, and why, right? Is such this embarrassment around literally loving yourself, in those moments. But when I tell you, it's a game changer. If you have the time, like even if you want to just pause this podcast for a second and go into the mirror and just stand there for a second. And yes, it's going to feel weird, but trust me, you probably have said weirder things to yourself and have done weirder things. This is just you being by yourself, right? Being in your own company. But just go to the mirror, take a good hard look, and just stand there, right? And just be mindful of the person that you see staring back at you. Maybe they're from another universe. Maybe they're your evil twin or your good twin, depending on what your morals look like. But either way, it's you taking a look at yourself, and understanding how you see yourself is not how the world sees you, for better or for indifferent. So how do you see yourself? Right? How do you see yourself? Last week I talked about trust, the whole concept of having trust issues and everything like that. This is how you develop trust too. Like being able to sit with yourself in uncomfortable moments. And I don't want to go off on a tangent from today's topic, but it probably ties in some way, shape, or form, because the more you know yourself, the more you know what you need, the more you know what you don't need, the more you recognize your breaking points in relationships, etc. But yeah, I think it's important sometimes to just like take a pause and see the person in the mirror and be like, yo, I see you and I do appreciate you. And just have that conversation, right? And again, people like they downplay it, but let me tell you something. When you start taking those little moments for yourself, unwarranted little moments or unprompted little moments for yourself, and you just, take a moment to be real with what you see and how you feel about the person that you see in the mirror, like it's really a game changer because that's you seeing yourself outside of influence, right? That's you making a decision to kind of like spend time with who you are outside of influence, and not being in such a hurry to look past yourself, right? Because you got to do something else or you rush. We look in the mirror every day. Like we check how our outfits look. We check our face in the mirror. We're constantly in the mirror, but how do we actually look at ourselves, right? We don't. We don't necessarily do that. That's my challenge for you this week, guys. At any point in your day, if you walk past a mirror, I just want you to like take a good look at the person that's staring back at you and just see them, see them. And if there's anything that comes up, just say thank you or just say something that's like very affirming of if you are having a hard time loving yourself right now, I want you to say something to yourself that's in the trajectory of working on loving yourself. You're not allowed to say anything negative. I put it like that. And you're not just allowed to say something. It needs to be a positive and an intentional positive. Does that make sense? Now that we got your homework out of the way, I don't care if school is out. You're always going to be working on yourself. Detachment. So when you hear the word detachment, what do you think about? Like, what's the first thing that comes to mind? Is it like, in your mind's eye, is it kind of like shutting down? Is it cutting things or people off? Like, what does detachment look like for you? And think about that. I looked it up to give you guys a definition. So emotional detachment refers to being disconnected or disengaged from the feelings of other people. This can involve an inability or an unwillingness to get involved in the emotional lives of other people. So that's a definition of emotional detachment, right? And in I'll be real with y'all. A lot of times, like these, and I think this is why I might do a whole separate episode on the healing community and spirituality. And I've actually it's been in my bank, like to do an episode on it. And for some reason, I keep resisting to do it. And I don't know what that is yet, but I think I'm going to touch on that because I think it's very important, to have some discernment in terms of like what that actually looks like and how, depending on who we follow, we could be led astray. And, when it comes to detachment, it just, how people explain it sometimes just seems very roundabout and not really get into the core of what it is, what it looks like, how to practice it, whatever. Most times people just throw out, oh, don't have expectations. And it's like, look, if you are in relationship with other people, you're going to have expectations, right? I would say practice not having expectations with strangers. Like, for example, if you're driving down the road and somebody cuts you off and you're pissed because you're like, you motherfucker, didn't you see me? Whatever the case may be. And instead of thinking of it in that way, can you say to yourself, if it wasn't me, it would have been somebody else. This person was going to do this one way or another, and it had nothing to do with me, right? That's an example of detaching yourself. in my opinion, and hopefully it makes sense to you, because we get caught up sometimes in these one-offs with random people and we personalize it because it's like, well, don't you see me? Right? Don't I matter to you in this moment? And truth be told, not always, right? Truth be told, not always. But does that mean you don't matter? Absolutely not. Okay. And I've learned to like be patient and practice that too, especially when driving, right? Because everybody is in this little box, right? And they're having their whole life inside that box contained. And they're just taking it on a road with them, right? So people are in glass cases of emotion driving down the road, as are you, right? You have your own things coming on. And think about it. When you get into your car in the morning, you're not thinking about all those other people on the road. You're thinking about what you have to do, what stresses you have to think about, like your fucking rocky relationship, your relationship with your parents, whatever. Like you're already running something by the time you start your car. Correct? So when you get on a road, it's like everybody's doing the same thing. Everybody's doing the exact same thing. It doesn't make it okay, but it's just awareness to what is. Okay? So funny enough, when I always have an idea in the beginning of the week, this is why I like just these podcast episodes are not scripted. And I like that way because it's real. Like everything that I'm saying is the first time it's being said. You guys are hearing it first. I was going to have a different episode this week, but a lot of weird things have been happening for the past, I'd say, couple weeks or so. In terms of like people coming back around, people I haven't heard from, people I've made peace with energetically, or people I've made an attempt to build bonds with, and they're just showing me that this cannot exist, right? And in all of those situations, it was a moment for me to have to detach myself. And when you think about what detachment looks like, there's this quote that says, "The true test is how you handle people who mishandle you." But I'll take it a step further. The true test of your character is how you handle people that mishandle you. The proof of your character is that those same people come back around. Okay? And it's crazy when you think about it, because sometimes you get caught up in the, oh man, I thought it was me this whole time. The way you were treated, you would have thought that you were doing something wrong the entire time for a person to treat you like that. But then they come back around and it's like, wait, if I was such a shitty person, why are you reaching out to me? Why are you like in my cipher? Like what's the point? You know what I'm saying? And the beauty in that, in those moments when people do come back around, is not that I'll use me for an example. So it's not that there was a lot of things that went through my head when they reached out. And I'm like, for what? You know what I'm saying? And at the same time, I was just like, all right, you know, like I could have easily violated, you know what I'm saying? I could have been like, you know, I don't fuck with you, just going on a rampage. And to some degree, it would have been valid. But I didn't. I was just like, hey, you know, what's going on? And, you know, a small conversation happened, but there was no desire to continue the conversation. The reason why is this. I've already had an experience with this person, and I know what that experience was. And whether I'm still healing from it or not, I don't desire to have a new experience with them of that energetic proximity. Does that make sense? Detaching yourself. And on top of that, I don't have to be bitter or mad with that person to not want to have a relationship with them. They're a person, I'm a person, and we're good. You see what I'm saying? And that's okay, right? That is okay. You could detach yourself. I think a lot of times the concept of detachment is so hard to grasp because there are two different narratives that get thrown out into the world. It's this whole concept of like, well, everybody's going through something, so be kind, so on and so forth. Don't have expectations, right? Love everybody, don't have expectations. And then, but also have boundaries, right? And in a lot of ways, boundaries can't work without some level of expectations and or standards. Like, if you have a boundary, that implies that you are expecting to no longer experience a certain outcome. So therefore, this boundary is put in place because you expect to not feel a certain thing, or you expect to not have a certain exchange anymore. And that's your standards too. Like, boundaries also represent the standards. It's all like murky and messy. So it's not always just this like this black and white trajectory. And I hope this makes sense to you guys. Detachment simply looks like removing how do I put it? Detachment is removing your, let's say, removing your control of the outcome, right? Removing your control over the outcome. And what I mean by that is, like, ideally we all want to go through life unharmed, right? We all want to go through life not feeling icky feelings. We all want to go through life and just feel at peace. And that doesn't always happen. So what do we do about that, right? Do you try to hurt the other person back, or do you just say, all right, I don't want to experience this anymore? And me not experiencing this anymore also means that I have to think about a different way, or I have to process these things so I don't continue to feel the same pain that I did initially about this person, place, or thing. Like, I have to do work on some end, because a lot of times I think the reason why detachment is so difficult for people is because we're waiting for an apology that may never come, right? We're waiting for somebody to hold themselves accountable and say, you know what, I was wrong. Or we're waiting for some kind of like vindication or redemption from a situation that we may never get. Like, the dialogue we have in our head about a particular situation never really happens in real life. But we play this scenario, and the funny thing is, the more we play it through our head, the more our body feels it, right? And we create this world that doesn't necessarily exist. Okay? So we're still attached to a certain outcome, right? When you detach, it's like it frees you up, right? It frees the other person up, but it more than anything frees you up. Like, you're no longer in this emotional prison waiting for somebody else to come down and say, all right, you're out. Right? You kind of open the door yourself. You're like, oh shit, I don't have to be in here. This door isn't even locked. Right? And the way you get there is, I think, is you start taking better care of yourself in your day-to-days. Like I said, standing in the mirror and saying, I love you. You may think that it doesn't associate, but it truly does. Right? You see yourself. You recognize what you deserve. And if somebody isn't serving that up, it's like, all right, dope, cool. You're just not it. Right? Another example is that I had somebody recently where it's like, you know, whenever it feels like you're chasing someone down to like develop a bond with them, that's information, right? If I feel like I'm chasing you down, or if I feel like I kind of got to remind you of me and versa, like, that is information. What you do with that information is up to you. Okay. And the one thing I pay attention to with people is if they say, oh yeah, I'm such a horrible communicator. Boom, that right there. That's information. That's all the information I need, actually. If you say, all right, I know I'm a bad communicator, or something on the lines of like, oh yeah, I know I'm a shitty this, you know, so you're aware. That tells me that you're also aware. You have to listen to what people say to you, right? I know I'm a shitty communicator. I know I'm this. Okay. Are you doing anything about it? And if there are multiple occasions where the same thing constantly happens and it's a repetitive experience, like specific experience where communication is an important component and it's not there, that's information for you. So what you can do is say, is this something I want to continue feeling, or is this a relationship I want to continue existing in? And by the time you ask, you already know the answer, whether it's yes or no for you particularly. I know for me, communication is huge. Especially when it comes to like time, plans, whatever the case may be, prioritizing. If I'm communicating for the both of us, there's no need for me to communicate anymore. You see what I'm saying? Because we're all adults, we all have priorities. And because we all have priorities, we are always prioritizing. And if you're showing me that communication is not really a priority when it comes to me in our relationship, that's information for me. And once I understand that for myself, I can now make a choice in terms of like, okay, this doesn't work for me. So I'm removing myself. I'm removing myself, right? Detachment involves like active listening, right? Detachment involves being honest. Like I said, last week, it's like a theme, trust issues, detachment, all these things. They kind of, I feel like they're in the same meeting room, right? And everybody has a different meal, but overall, everybody's on lunch break. It's kind of that modality. Like the goal in the room is for everybody to kind of exist on the same intention. It's just everybody's at a different point. I hope this makes sense to you guys, right? Detachment means, I'll say this: stop trying to not have expectations of people and instead look at the expectations you have of others. Like, what are they? Before you just try to cut away like, oh, I can't have expectations of people. No, what do they look like? And detachment will involve you advocating for yourself. So when this whole thing happened in particular where the other person wasn't communicating, I communicated what I needed. And I also asked questions like, if it wasn't for me like reaching out, would you have communicated? And I just left that there. Felt uncomfortable because I was like, man, I don't want to make anybody feel bad. But meanwhile, I'm realizing, Isaiah Frizzell, you're in this place of ambiguity because of someone else deciding to not communicate properly when it involved you and when it was necessary to communicate with you. You're now in limbo and you're now kind of like not knowing what's going on. Meanwhile, this person has their entire day planned and they just didn't say anything to you. That's shitty. It's inconsiderate. It's selfish, right? That's selfish. And not having expectations in that scenario is bullshit. I did have expectations. I expected to have some level of communication because I was involved in plans to some degree, right? But after the conversation happened and after I spoke up for myself, I was able to detach because now what I understood is that, okay, this is not an exchange that I'm being taken care of in. And I've recognized this multiple times already. So now what does that mean? This is not where you plant seeds. Whatever seeds are there, maybe they grow, maybe they don't, but it's not your job to constantly water them if you're the only person watering them. So you're not. Right? In order to detach sometimes, you will need to speak up for yourself. Because once you do, you're now saying things out loud. You're now showing up for yourself. You're now releasing those unhealthy feelings that you're harboring because of how somebody moved, but also because you didn't speak up about it. Okay? It's so layered in terms of detachment, but it looks like, again, taking time for yourself, but also like speaking up for yourself and also being aware of the expectations that you have and also being aware of how other people move. and you take all those back to the table and you see, all right, what can I make with these ingredients? Right? So yeah, I think, as we learn to grow and heal, what detachment looks like and feels like, it'll start to make more sense to you, right? Because it's not just about cutting people off, although that may happen. It's about understanding why you were removing someone versus just doing it. Like a knee-jerk reaction, oh, I'm just cutting this person off. Because a lot of times that's like, it's not the healthiest, right? Just walking around cutting people off isn't necessarily the healthiest. And if you've been through trauma and everything like that, that may be your trauma response, right? You may be on that pendulum, the heavy side of the pendulum right now, where you're just kind of like, fuck this, I'm not dealing with that, I'm not dealing with that. And it's like boom, 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 cutting people out. But if you're not aware of what's happening to you and through you, and why, how you're cutting people off and how you're removing people is not always going to make sense for you. Not so much the other person, but for you, right? And that's kind of where I've gotten is like, I'm all for giving chances. And I realize this for myself, as much as people like imply, oh yeah, you're not, you got to forgive others, you got to do this, and that might be too harsh. It's not, because I understand my process enough. Like I understand how much I'm usually willing to endure before I don't. So I know all of this. Like this is an internal kind of like modality that happens for Isaiah specifically. So by the time I reach a certain point, I've already thought things through thoroughly before I've made a decision. So by the time the decision happens, it's already thought about, which I think on the other end, people impulsively do things and then they think about them later, right? Which is why it seems like premature or whatever the case may be. But for me, it's like I know myself well enough. I know what my tipping point usually is, right? I know the why. So understand your why, right? And be honest with yourself, right? Be honest with yourself. What are your expectations of others versus your expectations of yourself? Are they a match? Are your expectations for yourself higher, right? All of this is something worth thinking about when it comes to detachment, and just process it. I'm going to go into practical things on the bonus content of this particular episode, because I really think that it's important to like unpack it and dissect detachment and what it looks like. So in the meantime, guys, just take care of yourselves. Yeah. I still have coaching slots available. So for anyone that's looking for some mental health coaching and working through some things, shoot me an email at thebirdbrainpodcast@gmail.com. Yeah, by the end of this year, the goal is to walk into the new year healed, accountable, aware, and accepting. Okay. So yeah, if you are wanting to work through some things and you're serious about doing the work, let's do it. All right. Yes. So with that being said, thank you to all the patrons, and the Flight Club subscribers. I appreciate y'all every week. And, if you're not a patron, become a patron, or if you're not an Apple subscriber, do it. All right. Coloring book is still out. They're still being shipped, and yeah, we're just growing out here, y'all. All right, I think that's it. Take care of yourselves, yeah? Take care of each other, and take flight.